Movies in short here. Today, we'll discuss a 2021 action, thriller movie called Jolt. Sit back, relax and enjoy. Lindy Lewis appears to be a shy, adorable little girl. Her parents encourage her to join a group of children at the table to enjoy some birthday cake. Most of the time she seems quite normal, but buried deep in her DNA she has a condition that's just waiting to be activated. As she turns to smile at her parents, the boy seated next to her takes her cake. He smirks triumphantly at her as he eats it. She is enraged and slams his head into the cake on the table. Everyone stares in disbelief. As she is growing up, Lindy becomes unable to control her rage at the slightest transgressions. While she waits quietly for her parents at the hospital, it is clear that she has become angrier and her condition has gotten worse. The doctor diagnoses her with intermittent explosive disorder. He gives her parents a form to sign to transfer guardianship to them. She cannot live safely in the world and no one is safe around her. She will have to live alone, isolated from others, until a cure for her disorder can be found. A huge amount of cortisol coursing through her body makes her stronger and faster than other people. She is observed by doctors as she sits in a padded room. Lindy has a hair-trigger temper and if provoked she will snap. Until she can gain control, she will live her life as a human lab rat. The doctors suggest the military could help to channel her unique condition. She wins all her fights and does not stop even when the whistle is blown. The soldiers cheer as she is dragged off her opponents. She is berated until she loses her temper, attacks the soldier in charge and is sent back to the institution. Lindy is subjected to an effective experimental treatment of self-administered shock treatment given through an electrode-lined vest she must wear. Thanks to the vest and the remote on her wrist, she is finally able to live in the world as a somewhat normal person. Lindy's therapist and designer of the vest, Dr. Ivan Munchin, encourages her to go on a date. Munchin believes that this will test if she is able to have a healthy, normal relationship with someone. She chooses to go out with an accountant named Justin. On the way to the restaurant to meet her date, a verbally abusive man in the street is shouting at a young female car valet. As she watches, her rage ensues and she imagines what she would do to him. She activates the shock vest to calm herself down. Lindy walks into the restaurant and introduces herself to Justin. She tells him she won't be staying and apologizes for leaving. She informs him that she doesn't date that much, and has no stories to share with him as he tells her some of his worst dating disasters. When the waitress arrives to take their order, Lindy tells her she will not be staying. The waitress insists Justin vacate the table immediately, as the table is for two. Lindy agrees to stay. As they try to place their order, the waitress is condescending and rude. Lindy picks up a sharp knife, then decides to activate the shock vest. She goes to the ladies' room and hears the waitress discussing the patrons disparagingly. When she tries to activate the shock vest this time, it does not work. Unable to stop herself, she viciously attacks the waitress and leaves the restaurant with Justin sitting alone at the table. He goes to the door but cannot see her outside. When Lindy gets back to her apartment, she disrobes, revealing the electrode-lined vest she is wearing. She visits Dr. Ivan Munchin and demands that he fix her electroshock remote. He throws her a pair of handcuffs to restrain herself while he checks the device. He asks if the date he arranged with Justin was a success. She tells him that she had not been able to avoid beating the shit out of someone, so it wasn't. Dr. Munchin says that her electroshock vest is not a cure. Progress will only commence if she begins to reconcile with her past. As he taps repeatedly on the table, Lindy imagines breaking free from the handcuffs and stabbing him in the jugular vein. She breathes deeply. He throws her the key to unlock the handcuffs, tells her he has increased the voltage and warns her there is only so much a human body can take. He says the answer to all her problems is close human connection. Lindy travels on the subway sitting next to a man who deliberately tries to crowd her out. She hits him in the face. Justin says he is glad she called him for their second date. They discuss their lives. He works as an accountant for a private company owned by a guy named Barry. Lindy tells him she used to work in security as a bouncer in a crappy bar. She explains that it's not about size, but also speed, endurance and fearlessness. She says she'd like to be a photographer. Lindy invites him into her apartment. Justin sees her electroshock vest and says it's not a big deal. They spend a passionate night together. The next morning, Justin gives Lindy a gift along with breakfast in bed. She opens it and sees a camera. Justin remembered her dream profession was to be a photographer. Lindy visits her therapist Dr. Munchin to discuss her successful date with Justin. Inspired, she rushes off to use her new camera. Later that evening, Lindy calls Justin. His phone is answered by a police officer. She goes to the police station where detectives Vickers and Nevins inform her that Justin has been murdered. Lindy attends his funeral and is the only mourner. She remembers their brief, happy time together and her anger starts to spiral out of control. She visits Dr. Munchin and attacks him angrily, claiming that the vest has stopped functioning. He shocks her to stop the attack, She continues to shock herself repeatedly, saying the vest is not working. He injects her with a sedative as the shocks are not helping Lindy. She dreams of Justin. When Lindy wakes up, Dr. Munchin tells her he is sorry to hear about Justin, but she needs to focus on herself. She calls the detectives claiming to have more details about Justin's murder as a ploy to get them out of the precinct to gain access to the evidence. When they leave, she goes to the precinct. She sees Justin's shirt and remember their night together. She then takes his cell phone and wallet. Lindy then heads to Justin's apartment and looks around. She gets a call from Detective Vickers, who believes Lindy is innocent. He tells her that Detective Nevins is on the way to arrest her. After a brief and violent encounter with Nevins, Lindy leaves and goes to the basement garage. She drives away in Justin's McLaren sports car, escaping after a long car chase in which Vickers gets injured. After arriving at Technomag and meeting with the manager of the store, she asks who's the biggest geek here. Lindy is taken to Andy, a female hacker, who locates Justin's client, Barry Kasparsky, who was the last person he was in contact with. She gives Andy the keys to Justin's car as payment for her help. Lindy goes to the abandoned building to meet Barry, who is overseeing an underground fight. Barry asks her what she wants. She asks him if he killed the accountant. He denies killing Justin and asks if she is a cop or a fed. She says oh no, just a girlfriend. Lindy suggests that after she fights and wins against 3 of his best guys he should tell her the name of the killer. Barry says it sounds like fun. Barry selects 3 of the best fighters and tells her they will all fight her at the same time. Lindy tells him she likes a challenge. No rules apply. Lindy savagely attacks the fighters, knocking them out one by one and win the brutal fight, as Barry watches and the crowd cheer. Barry says the fight is over and orders everyone to leave. After winning the fight, as Lindy and Barry travel in his car, Barry tells her that he has never been a man of his word. His driver points a gun at her. She incapacitates him and Barry tries to escape. Lindy contains him and threatens to shock him as he sits spread-eagled on the car engine. She repeats her question and Barry informs her that a billionaire recluse named Gareth Faisal, who was Justin's boss, had him killed. Barry asks if she really is stupid enough to go after Gareth. She says she is and shocks him. Lindy visits Detective Vickers in the hospital and thanks him for giving her the chance to do the right thing. She tells him she has found out that Gareth Faisal killed Justin. He asks if she has any proof. Detective Vickers says Gareth is a billionaire recluse with his fingers in a lot of illegal pies and is untouchable. Lindy asks where she can find him. He gives her his address downtown. Detective Nevins interrupts them and chases Lindy through the hospital to the maternity ward. A crying baby in the maternity ward starts to send her into a rage, but she shocks herself to calm down. As she comforts the baby, Detective Nevins storms in with her gun drawn and warns her not to move or even breathe. Lindy begins throwing the babies at Nevins to slow her down as she escapes. Lindy makes her way to Gareth's building. She asks the doorman for Gareth Faisal. He says there is no one there by that name. Delacroix, the head of security, greets her and asks her to follow him. They enter the lift which goes down towards the lower basement instead of the top floor. Just as Lindy notices, he knocks her unconscious. She wakes up in a clinical white basement room, zip-tied to a chair, with her vest removed. Delacroix asks what the electrode vest is for. She says it is not a good idea to take the vest as she needs it for her bad heart. After threatening to kill her, Delacroix keeps the vest and sends Lindy back to her apartment in a car. He informs Gareth that she has been asking about an accountant. In an attempt to escape, Lindy chokes the driver, causing them to crash. She runs away. Dr. Munchin arrives home to see Lindy, who asks him to help her with a new device, as she lost hers. She points a gun at him, then apologizes and gives it to him. He gets another vest for her and she returns to her apartment. Lindy notices that her door number has moved, indicating that someone has been there. She climbs through a window. Faisal's men have rigged an explosive device to the doorway. Lindy disarms the explosive and puts it in a bag for future use. She switches on the gas, places a small foil-wrapped device in the microwave, sets the timer for 20 minutes, then leaves. She sees Detective Vickers outside her apartment and gets into his car. She convinces Vickers not to arrest her. They discuss her condition. As they speak, her apartment blows up. She scales Faisal's building. Delacroix is waiting for her as she reaches the top. He takes her to Faisal. They converse briefly and she insults him. Delacroix hits her on the head again. She wakes up zip-tied to a chair in the white basement. Delacroix tells her he didn't kill Justin. He then attempts to exsanguinate her. Enraged, she breaks free and fights him. Before he dies, Lindy asks him how to get to Faisal, and cuts his finger off. She escapes after incapacitating the guards on her way out. After using Delacroix's finger to access Faisal's lair in order to kill him, Lindy finds Gareth already dead. Justin steps out of the shadows. He tells her he used her as a decoy so he could kill Faisal and she would be blamed. He says Lindy was just an experiment by Dr. Munchin which he funded. Justin tells her he just needed to figure out what he needed to use to kill Faisal, who was a liability that everyone wanted dead, but was untouchable even by the government. As Lindy's rage rises, she goes to attack him. He activates the shock device repeatedly as he continues to insult her. As she is so incredibly angry, her vest has become ineffective. Lindy throws the bag containing the bomb at Justin, triggers the bomb and runs. Faisal's entire lair blows up with Justin in it. Dr. Munchin enters his office to find her waiting for him. She intends to kill him for betraying her. He apologizes as he holds a gun in his hand. As detectives Vickers and Nivens arrive, Lindy decides not to shoot him and handcuffs him instead. Vickers shoots Lindy in the leg as he thinks she is trying to shoot Dr. Munchin. Nivens arrests him on multiple charges. Lindy is taken to the city hospital where she claims self-defense to all the charges from the detectives. Nivens tells her she's going to jail for attacking her. After Nivens leaves, Vickers returns her vest and her camera. He invites her to dinner sometime to make up for shooting her. Lindy returns to her burnt-out apartment and looks through the rubble. A woman enters the room. Lindy doesn't recognize her and asks who she is. In a flashback, we see she is a doctor from Lindy's past experiments. The doctor attempts to recruit Lindy to join some unnamed organization, telling her that through their work she will learn how to harness her rage. Before Lindy has a chance to respond, the mysterious woman presses her electroshock remote and the film abruptly ends. It appears that we will only find out more about this mysterious doctor and her intentions for Lindy in the sequel. A post-credit scene shows Andy as she learns that Lindy's gift to her is Justin's McLaren sports car. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell if you want to watch more videos like this. Thanks and see you again soon.